That's my secret little thing, is I watch cartoon movies that make me feel all gushy inside.
Chris will never say their names correct.
But before you go, you need to go to where the sausage is made.
We can't afford to pay for that song, so...
I knew he was coming with that. We got it.
Chris, if this came out in the 1950s, this would be a mind-blowing movie.
I'm trying to help you bring your game up now.
Hello and welcome to Movie
Hello and welcome to Movie Smash, the podcast where we dive headfirst into comic book movies outside the MCU. If you're new to the show, thanks for joining us, and if you've been here before, you know the drill. Each episode, we're going to smash a movie whose source material is from a graphic novel or a comic. Are they worth revisiting? Should they be forgotten? Let's find out. This is Movie Smash. I'm one of your hosts, Chris Roberts. I'm the founder of Off Panel Creations. With me today, I have Jeremy Parmentier.
Hi, I'm Jeremy Parmentier of the Retrovaniacs podcast as well, and I am another superhero with a very poorly defined power.
And Fergel Amayo.
Well, I just cannot top this man every time he comes with something awesome like that. I am Fergel Amayo, your proprietor of Nerdiness, the owner of Gotham Knight Comics, and I am here to talk of Anadramika of Scythia.
Our movie today is 2020's The Old Guard, starring Charlize Theron, Kiki Layne, and Matthias, I cannot pronounce his last name, and director Gina Prince. Written by Greg Rucka.
I have the new one.
And?
I think she has potential. See, you're already healing faster. You're gonna do great.
So you good guys or bad guys?
Depends on the century.
So we really never die.
Just because we keep living doesn't mean we stop hurting.
Throughout history, we've protected this world, fighting in the shadows. But it's nearly impossible to disappear in the world we live in today.
Are you familiar with the comic that this movie is based off of?
I was. So this is 2017. I was really starting to ramp back into books, and I was also picking up like Invincible and Walking Dead, some issues. So unusual offhand comics were coming, and I was attracted to the art. So the art was pretty awesome on this book, and it's a good story. It's an interesting take on the immortal genre.
I was not familiar with this. In fact, after the previous episodes we've done on things I wasn't familiar with, I was like, I'm going to go and get, something from this from my local comic shop. And they didn't have anything from this series, so I am going into this fully blind. I'm 0% familiar with the source material.
When I first saw this movie, I had no idea of this comic. So in preparation for the show today, I did go out and purchase this and read through it.
I have all 16 issues, so I don't have the graphic novels, but I have the 16 issues that's based on. That's basically pulled right from. So it's an unusual book. It sort of had a quick run and then kind of came out. You can find some mint issues. The graphic novels they don't really carry too many because indies are not picking up a lot of steam. There's not a ton of great indies out there. Yeah,
well, it's only like $16 on Amazon right now. Do you guys had you guys seen this movie before watching it for the show today?
I did. I was trapped in the pandemic. This is a 2020 pandemic movie. So this is when we were all just stuck in the house. So I watched this movie, enjoyed it, amazing. They pulled a lot of stories. I just wish they would have focused more on the backgrounds because that's what made the comics awesome, was interweaving the backgrounds better.
I still haven't seen this movie, so I don't have. No, I'm just kidding. I did see this movie, but just for this podcast. I had not seen it till this week.
I actually did see this when it first came out, but initially during the pandemic. Netflix at that time was coming out with a ton of movies, a ton of action movies like Heart of Stone, Extraction, The Gray Man. I think Red Notice was one of theirs as well. So it was sort of that bundle. And I think I just finished watching The Warrior Nun. And so the algorithm pushed me right into this show, The Old Guard. Fergel, since Jeremy didn't see it, what was your initial experience with this movie?
I liked it. Well, I'm a big Charlize Theron fan. I'm not gonna lie. Ever since I saw Atomic Blonde, I'm like, this girl can play a bad guy, right? She can do some business. She's got skill sets, even at her age. I think she's showing it really well. And I thought the movie, again, the comic, the story is amazing, right? And the movie is so fast. It does a good job being what it is, but...
So you're telling me that Atomic Blonde was your first Charlize Theron movie?
No, it wasn't my first Charlize Theron movie, but what it was her doing ass-kicking on the level of John Wick.
If I see Charlize Theron in an action movie, I know it's going to be passable, a worst-case scenario, and fun on a good level. She's been doing action since, like Aeon Flux?
I knew Aeon Flux existed. I didn't mention that on purpose.
So, Fergel, what is a little bit of the history of this comic?
2017 first came out. It was part of a graphic novel series that got converted into comics. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, it's an Image Line. It's actually written by Greg Rucka. And I say that name because the other guy, which is Leonardo Fernandez, he's an Argentine artist. He's got some good things, but Greg Rucka is a 3-time Eisner Award winner. He's made some great stories. And so that's a big deal, 3-time Eisner. And it spawned a film. Skydance is not a small company. Netflix is not a small company. And now they got a sequel. So, I mean, there's steam to this movie. I just hope they bring the bad guy, because this was not a really serious bad guy to me.
Just a quick spoiler warning. If this is your first time joining us, just a heads up. We'll be discussing the plot of this movie and maybe discussing some elements of the story that might be considered spoilers, so consider yourself warned.
Consider yourself warned.
So, Jeremy, can you give us a quick synopsis of what this movie's about?
I will, but first I do want to say, yes, it's on Netflix, because this is a Netflix production, so it's going to be on Netflix. But also, if this is your first time joining this podcast, make sure to go online and look up the actors for this movie, because Chris will never say their names correctly. Just be used to that. It's going to happen. I'm used to it. It's okay.
That was great. Good warning in there. Consider yourself warned.
Just saying. Not that I'll do any better, but I don't even try. So if you want to know the plot of this movie, I will tell you right now. This movie introduces to Charlize Theron's character, who's Andy. She has a much larger name that I believe Fergel has already said, but I, again, will not even try. She leads a team of soldiers of fortune that they happen to be not just excellent at being soldiers of fortune, but they're immortals. They don't age, or they age very slowly. I'm not really sure. But they also quick heal, like Deadpool does, kind of, but nowhere near as funny. They find out there's another immortal who's kind of woken up, named Niall Freeman, as a Marine. You see her die, and then she kind of miraculously wakes up in the hospital the next day with no scars. She has her throat slit wide open. She has no scars at all. And apparently these immortals will dream of new immortals and dream of each other until they kind of find them and bring them into their circle. So that's what Andy goes to do. She goes to Afghanistan to recruit the Marine into her team. Meanwhile, James Copley, who's a former CIA agent, is working with Stephen Merrick, who's some kind of big pharma bad guy, who's found out about these immortals, and they want to get samples of their blood to make some kind of super quick healing drug of some sort. Someone in the original group of Andy's group betrays them to get them captured by Merrick, so that on the same chance that this research would find the super drug would also cure the immortality that he's decided is kind of a curse as well. Andy and most of the team get captured by Merrick, which leaves the new recruit Niall to try and save them and thwart Merrick's plans.
Dun, dun, dun. That was incredibly well put. Like, Jeremy, that feels like you practiced that. If I may be so bold, and if I may add some commentary to that, that was impressive. I was rapt.
I didn't practice it, but I did learn from the last few times Chris has asked me on kind of by surprise that I should have something ready for that.
That's why I have the quick synopsis versus the play-by-play of Superman. So let's jump into the characters a little bit. So obviously we have the old guard, we have the big bad villain. What character stood out to you guys from this action movie?
Well, the whole story, I think you guys got to start kind of look bigger, like Anadrama, and I'm going to say Anadromica of Scythia. The comic alludes to this. She's born in 4700 BC, like at the Trojan War. So, I mean, she literally is been immortal for 6,000 plus years. So that would make her, before Christ, before all of it, she saw all of it. So the level of knowledge of this lady, the background and stories and how she got the axe and what that means, and it's dope. I just think she's the freshest, but I also like the French guy.
So let's talk about the villain a little bit. He is sort of like a farmer bro, and every one of his sports jackets had a hoodie attached to it. How'd you guys feel as him as the villain, Merrick?
I did not think he was a very good villain. I mean, I understand that, if you're trying to make this series be somewhat realistic, right? Sure, the main characters are immortals, but not everyone else is, and not everyone knows about these immortals, and all, fine, you have to have some reason, some realistic thing for some actual human being to do. So it makes sense, especially around 2020, to really focus on, being a douche farmer bro, being the guy who's trying to get their blood to make a thing. I don't know. It was fine. I would say, you just mentioned Superman, about my extremely long plot summary. But also in Superman, the plot of the first Superman movie was, quote, realistic, right? It had to kind of make sense. The bad guy's plans had to go somewhere. Lex Luthor's in the comic books a much larger than life, super genius, super villain. Where in the first Superman movie, he's like, yeah, I have this idea to get rich on real estate. This is kind of the same level of bad guy, where it's like, yeah, he's got a lot of money and he's a bad guy, and so he can hire guys with guns, but he's just a guy who's trying to get rich off this plan. He's not a very interesting villain, but I guess it's a good introduction to how these people fit in the world today.
I'm going to just echo that and tell you, I think that Merrick was a poor bad guy, not really well fleshed out by it, very two-dimensional. You mentioned the natural hoodie. He kind of looked like Sam Fried Binkman. So he's very, very in that same, or Martin Shkreli, who bought the Wu-Tang album, which is, you mentioned the Farmer Bro. So I just kind of felt like, it had better stories. I think this movie succeeds not necessarily because of the bad guy, but because of what that Martin Copley does afterwards, telling them kind of in the end scenes where their effects, because remember, these people have been alive for hundreds of years, so getting them out of their disillusionment and into a purpose. That's what the movie is about, because I think they're going to need that purpose if they go up against another immortal.
How'd you guys feel about Copley? Speaking of Copley,
I always like that dude. I think Chiwetel Ejiofor is an amazing actor. And yes, I did spell that. I think I said that right. Chiwetel Ejiofor. I'm going to just throw it out there. Someone's going to correct me, but I'm going to say it. Chiwetel.
I'm not going to attempt his name, but I think he got it wrong.
I think you started right, and then it devolved into the wrong. I think when you first said it, I was like, that's pretty good. And then the more you kept trying, the more it was way off.
Yeah, it's funny. Looking at the cast of this movie, there are so many names I will not even attempt that I will just butcher and do them wrong. But Copley, the actor who plays Copley, I remember him originally from as the operative from Serenity.
Yes, Serenity is a great movie. Classic cult movie. You're just throwing it out there. I love you, man. Thank you for doing that.
How do you guys feel about the sequel bait of Quinn?
I thought the way she died was horrible. Like, I thought that would drive any person insane, is to be drowned and reborn and drowned and reborn. That would literally drive you insane. But the comic alludes she's searched for her for centuries. And so it's a similar situation, but the comic alludes more depth in that story. And I think that's where the the movie was trying to jam so much into so little.
Well, in the book, she falls off the ship. She's not thrown off. She just trips and falls off the ship, and they go trying to find her, and they never find her at all. So I actually thought the Iron Maiden sort of sinker in that, drive her insane, was more visceral than just her falling off the boat. Like I said, I just read the book a couple days ago.
Yeah.
And the actually trapping her in that pseudo Iron Maiden torture device.
Yeah.
That would drive you insane, because she dies over and over again for hundreds of years.
I can't imagine that. That would be sucky.
But they did change her. She was originally Japanese in the book, but she was Vietnamese in the movie.
And they rewrote the entire character around a Vietnamese accent woman to create the storyline and make it fit the movie. That's a little something you might not know. Yeah,
it's because the actress said that, who was cast for it, while in production, said, "Hey, can we make her Vietnamese? Because I'm Vietnamese and I don't want to play a Japanese character."
Wow, you always have more knowledge about this stuff than I do. I think I'm preparing, and you're like going Ricky Recruit preparing. Man.
Well, I'm trying to help you bring your game up, man. Let's go into scenes a little bit. I want to talk about the betrayal. Booker betrays them. How did that feel natural? Did it feel like an actual betrayal?
I think it was a tiredness. I think the guy, that's part of the reason why I think the backstories kind of matter and continue to matter, because he was obviously pretty conflicted about what he wanted to do, but he didn't want to live anymore. And it just makes you question immortality. Like if you watch everyone die around you and you're just tired and you're disillusioned and you don't want to live anymore.
Well, and again, this is immortality, but one of the major plot points is that it's not true immortality. Eventually, that immortality fades and they can die, right? They talk about somebody that happened to. It kind of happens to another main character in this movie at some point. So even if he's tired, if he's only, and I don't know how old he is, because they don't really give a lot of the backstory of each of
200 years.
So he's 200 years old. If other people in his group are 6,000 years old, it means if he's already tired, he's got eons to live. So I can get that. If you see this as a curse and you see this as like, I'm never going to get to rest. I'm just tired. I hate this world. I just want to go and I can't. No matter what I try, I'm going to keep coming back. I can see that kind of slowly kind of driving it to where if you thought there was an out, especially if it's an out that could also, help other people, why wouldn't you take it? So I thought his turn was interesting. And I liked that character. Also that actor, whose name I will not try to say, Matthias.
Is that the guy that you have listed? Is that the guy you have listed on the credits here for who's in the movie?
Yeah.
I'm going to attempt to say his name. Is Matthias Schoenaerts. He
was in a recent series on HBO Max called The Regime as kind of like another similar character who has not an immortal, but this kind of like he kind of is good bad, like depending what's going on. And so I thought he was an interesting character in that. So I was very excited to see him in this. And therefore, when he did the turn, I was kind of like, yeah, that makes sense. I kind of expected it.
Yeah, he's of the original four. He is the youngest of those four. Andy is thousands of years old, and then you had the two from the Crusades.
underused a lot. Nikki, and I can't remember what the other guy's name is, they really pushed on that idea that they were on opposite ends of the Crusades for a century. They just kept killing each other. Several centuries.
So how'd you guys feel about that intro fight scene where we're sort of introduced the characters and almost the rules around their immortality?
It was cool. It was definitely cool. I like the fact that the bullets popped out and their wounds healed up. And then they went to town. She went to town with the axe.
Yeah, that axe, I mean, I felt that. I've been hit by an axe before, and it's painful.
I mean, it was fine. I'm going to be honest. I was not thrilled with this movie because it looked like every other action movie. If you guys didn't say, hey, this is based on a comic or whatever, I would have just watched this in the same mindset that I would have watched, something like John Wick or The Messenger or any of these movies where like stuff just happens real fast and it's actiony and it doesn't have to be realistic. The fact that they were immortal was cool, but like that was the trick. And the rest of the movie is just that. The things that I really liked about this movie were those flashback scenes and talking about like the people who had passed and the person who drowned in the Iron Maiden, like all that stuff was super interesting. And you're right. They talked about those things for maybe 35 seconds out of this movie. Otherwise, it's not bad, but it's just very much like, okay, they're immortal, so they can't die. We're going to do that over and over again. And it was fine. I just wanted to see more of the flashbacks that they didn't have enough of. And I'm hoping that if I can ever get a copy of the trades, that maybe they do deal more into that than they did in this movie.
They do. They talk about different battles, and I think you get to understand how each of the person got their weapons.
I feel sort of the same way. Like I saw this movie when it first came out. I saw it on Netflix. Looking back on it before we chose this movie again, I was like, oh, I enjoyed that movie because it's a Charlize Theron movie and I enjoy her movies. But going back on it now, it really it is a boilerplate movie in the sense of it's got action, it's got a good premise, but it wasn't fleshed out too much. It's kind of like Highlander meets John Wick, just not as cool as that sounds. I was kind of expecting Queen to play in the background, a couple of them.
That's why you added soundtrack into our show flow.
Well, speaking of the soundtrack, I did want to talk about that a little bit because it wasn't your standard sort of, there wasn't a score to this movie. It was just actual songs played over it.
I think that would have required me to watch it one more time to really pick up on the score.
Now, some of the reviews I've seen on this movie as well, people sort of touched on about how it sort of took them out of the movie. And I was curious for you guys, did the fact that it wasn't scored, it was actual just songs, did that take you out of the movie at all? Or did it help with the tempo for it?
Didn't take me out of the movie. I don't think it was determinative one way or the other. And that's a big word, by the way. I just threw that in there to get kind of serious, folks. I don't think it was determinative to the conclusion or epic strategy of this movie attempted.
Yeah, I didn't even notice. I'm going to be quite honest. I didn't even notice the soundtrack to this movie.
It's fine. I'll cut the section out.
No, I mean, that's not a thing. Like, so you mentioned Queen, right? So a movie that has like an over the top soundtrack like that, if you're going to pick an artist or artists that are a different style that wouldn't make sense for it, like in Shaun of the Dead, right? I love Shaun of the Dead. The bar fight scene where he's fighting the zombies and it plays the Queen song and all that stuff's going on. Like that is wonderful, and it's part of the scene that pulls you in, but it doesn't, it cuts kind of because like it doesn't fit, which is why it works really well. The music was fine. Like it wasn't like, it didn't pull me out, but it also wasn't like, oh man, I love these songs. It was just like, yep, it's a soundtrack to a movie. It was fine. Like I wasn't trying to like say I didn't even notice it. What a stupid topic. I'm just saying like they didn't pull me out of the movie. That was the question you asked. My answer is no, it didn't. But I also didn't notice it in a way that was like, I love this soundtrack. It's great. It was just a soundtrack.
So just like the movie itself, it was meh.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, it's very correct.
The movie wasn't meh. I think you guys are looking at this completely incorrect. The movie wasn't meh. It just gave you some hints, right? I think if you look at I think the last scene was important, the Copley scene when they're in that room and he's walking them through his study of them forever and all the way back. And I think it gives us an opportunity to look at, I hope what they do in the next movie is give a much more intensive flashback on each of the immortals, because there's not that many of them. So let's talk about them. Let's even talk about Lycan, who died.
That was my favorite scene of the movie, is the end where they show what the things they did in the past. I love that. Even though it was just like, yeah, we're just going to play this, you get to see these shots while it shows some credit. I thought it was incredible. That was my favorite part of this movie. Not because it was over, but I liked that part.
I knew it would be. That's why I think the second movie is going to take it up, because now we've got Quinn back. So now you have so that's where I think when you're dealing with people like the problem that this movie had in itself, in a nutshell, was simply that you had a young lady, Andy, right? She's like 7,000 years old. What are you going to throw at her? Like, you got to throw something good at her, because otherwise she has seen it, done it, been there, whipped your ass, taken the shirt home, probably had sex with your grandfather, and then made you.
Yeah, what was the actual line? They said that she's forgotten more ways to kill a person than an army knows how to do.
That's what we needed to do And I hope the second movie we get to see a lot more of that, because that's what's gonna that gives us that does justice, right? The first movie wet the whistle, but I think you had to be looking for it. So like Jeremy just said, the end of the movie is the best part, and you said the flashbacks, they didn't spend near enough time. That's what made this story stand out in the comic story to me, because I've read the Immortal, like nobody still has been able to top Highlander. To me, that first movie, until I see something that comes close to that, right? That just sets the stone, and it lets me out. But this is the first movie since that movie where I've looked at the title and said, that's a really unique way. Immortality ends, you don't know, but you're not super strong, but you're so long, you learn to kill in so many ways.
When was the last time you saw Highlander?
Oh, probably less than a month ago. It came on TV on a Sunday. It came on AMC, and I was like, oh, stop the presses. We're watching this movie. And I put on the color around the TV and gave the whole darken the room up and let that queen come in.
Yeah, you might have some nostalgia glasses for that one.
My counterpoint to that statement, though, like you said, this is because it's building up to what the next movie should be, and then you'll have like this enemy that seems to be more impressive. We just watched Deadpool, a movie that is over the top ridiculous, but they did find a way to make just some other strong guy a really interesting set of fights. Now, sure, that was over the top, and there was a lot going on there. But I still wasn't like, man, what a lame enemy. It was still just a bad guy, and it was fine, and it worked. In this case, I was kind of like, there really isn't that major enemy that she has to go against. It was just kind of like, can she get free from being captured? That was it. Like, there wasn't, I don't know. It was fine, but we've watched other movies that were able to introduce the character, introduce a big mythos, and get you a good conclusion. We did, what's his name?
Ghost World?
No, yep, Ghost World. There was this huge fight in Ghost World. No, hold on. I just had it on the tip of my tongue, but then I thought of Deadpool because we just talked about it. Hold on. What was the demon guy? We watched Hellboy. Hellboy has this huge built-in background. They introduce it to you just fine. And yet you still have this big fight at the end that seems amazing. So, like, they could have done more, although, again, I don't know the source material. So maybe this makes total sense for the source material, but I thought instead it was a little bit subdued for the kind of movie I expected this to be.
It really is a good play-by-play of the source material itself. The problem is they didn't really flesh out the big bad so well, but I think they made a couple changes. One of the changes was that one of the immortals loses their immortality. That's not in the comics. So they did that to create stakes, which kind of tells you that there was an issue with the actual original material as well, because there were no stakes, because these guys can't be stopped. It's sort of like battling an army of a horde of zombies or something. For me personally, I like the movie. The thing is, I want a movie to stand on its own 2 feet. I want a movie where I don't have to go into it saying, if I'm making recommendations about a movie saying, don't worry, you watch this movie, it gets really good in the third act of the second one. That's a huge commitment to say to somebody, hold on, it gets better. So I think what you're saying, Jeremy, is that the movie itself doesn't have enough to sort of stand alone as its own thing.
Yeah, if I didn't know this was based on, again, a series of comics, and you guys were like, oh, this is, I knew there's a sequel now, but if I wouldn't have known, like, that there's more to it, this was just like, there's not enough in this movie to bring me back on its own.
Agreed. And Charlize Theron carried most of it. I agree. I 100% agree. Everything you guys just said, agreed. And it's interesting because around this same time, Infinity also came out. Have you seen that Infinity movie, that Mark Wahlberg movie, where they live lives over and over again?
No,
I have not.
They're reincarnated. So it's another really interesting movie, and they managed to make it very over. Matter of fact, the same bad guy, Copley, plays the bad guy in that movie. And they managed to make that completely over the top while also keeping it like interested. It's based on a comic. And if you watch the movie, I guarantee you'll come away going, this is a pretty damn good movie. Still flashbacks, but they do it so well that it shows where, again, and let's call it what it is. This movie was made during the pandemic, so there's got to be some points where they were making sacrifices.
Well, no, it was made before the pandemic, but released during the pandemic.
But wasn't the reshoots done as the pandemic was kicking off?
You might be right. I just didn't see any of that in my research.
Well, I guess I don't know at all.
No worries. Nobody thought that. Well, the funny thing about Netflix movies is there's very few like commentaries you can find anywhere about it. They're very tight-lipped about things.
They're very tight-lipped about everything. Reed Hastings had it figured out.
So for the future, guys, should people go out and watch this? Should they go find it?
If part 2 gets the hype it should, then absolutely. I think you should read the comics. I honestly think you'll have a better experience. I think if you read the comics and then just gave it a little time, read the comics, take an opportunity, read the first couple, pick a few. Pick your character, because I think there's a background story in each of the comics about each of the immortals. So if you can read a character and learn the background, then you watch the movie, yeah, you'll fall in love with it because it's pretty dope. But without that, yeah, then it's like Farmer Bro versus Immortal.
I think if the sequel, because the sequel's supposed to come out this year, I think, or maybe early next year. Again, another Netflix movie. I would say watch this before watching that, because if that movie is going to just kind of go immediately in full with the knowing that these immortals exist and that this other immortal came back, and you won't have that backstory, possibly. Maybe this is worth watching to make the next movie even better. But again, on its own, I don't think it's something you should rush out and see. I don't think it does anything too interesting in this movie on its own.
It's sort of your, I think you said it, it's like the Superman thing. Superman 1 is really the build-up to Superman 2.
It is, except that, again, for the time frame, though, Superman was impressive. Even if you were like, yeah, the story's not great. For 1978, like, I watched that movie a million times in the, early 80s and everything, because there weren't a lot of other superhero movies. So it's still, even though the actual story was like, okay, it was still cool to see Superman fly. And it was Superman, a character everybody knows on a movie. Like, there weren't a lot. This, though, is so much later. There's a million other action army movies out there. So this doesn't do anything on its own that you're like, but I know this is impressive at the time. It's fine. There are other movies where people regenerate immediately that look cooler. I don't know. I want this to be better than it is. And I think I also, without reading the source material, it's hard for me to say like this could have been better or worse. Because you guys are saying it's very close to the source material, with the source material giving more backstory and flashbacks. Maybe that's what it would have taken for me. I don't know. I was more disappointed that each of the immortals didn't have more interesting powers, right? I don't need anything too crazy, but like, I'm unfortunately, even though I didn't read the source material for this, for Retrovaniacs, we've been covering Metal Gear Solid 3, episode that just came out. And that game, if you haven't played any of the Metal Gear Solid games, it's, Snake is just going through these things. He's a guy with a gun. He doesn't have any special abilities except that he's very good at his job. But all the bad guys he's fighting, like all the main enemies, because it's a video game, are like these crazy... there's a guy in the third game that can control a swarm of bees and can make armor out of bees and then shoot bees at you like they're guns. There's a guy that can make himself invisible and like throws poison darts at you. Like, all these guys are really crazy and interesting while still kind of fitting the style and the theme of this kind of military unit thing. This, instead, they're all like, well, we can just die and come back. And we have guns. I know you said the axe and the other weapons. They don't really explain that, though. So I wish I would have known more about it.
I think that's a problem. Well, two things I now know about Jeremy. One, he wants to fly. I think if Jeremy had a superpower, it'd be he wants to fly. And I'm just going to leave it there, and that's okay. And two, we got to have, I think immortality isn't quite as impressive as it seems off the cover, because we need more powers for Jeremy. Jeremy gets more powers, he feels better about the whole scenario, and then you can live. But see, I think the biggest issue is that you're comparing all immortals in some form or another to Deadpool, or Wolverine, who can heal pretty well as well. But the true immortal situation. What about the Will Smith movie with Charlize Theron? That was almost an immortal movie. Isn't that an immortal movie?
So I actually read that differently. I took it as Jeremy wants the superpower of shooting bees, not flying. Jeremy, it's funny, as we've had this discussion, my view has really cleared up on this movie as sort of what was missing from my mind. So there's a battle scene that happens at that cathedral outside of Paris. And effectively, Andy takes care of everybody, right? That's her job. She goes out, she kills everybody. The other three do nothing, right? Two of them get kidnapped, and one of them sort of just sits there because his gut got blown out. So I wish we saw the fighting efficacy of those other three. We see it at the very last act, but we don't see it leading up to that last act. So Andy really just sort of cleans up everything, and the other guys just sort of stick along for the ride.
Well, and Andy has the only cool, in my opinion, the only super cool, like, oh, look at this thing where she jumps out of the window with the guy, letting herself basically fall to her death because she's going to come back. Like, that was awesome. Like, if you know you can't die, that's a great way to kill people.
Are you talking about the ending? Are you talking about the ending scene?
When Niall grabs Farber and jumps out the window. That was a really cool ending.
That was Niall Freeman, wasn't it? That wasn't Andy, right? That was Niall Freeman. She jumped right out. Yeah, she jumped right out of that bad boy. And when she came back together, I was just thinking to myself, that actually would be kind of dope, just to be able to know you could do all kinds of stuff. It'd give you a little bit of time. And you could build a lot. I don't understand why these, if you're alive for 6,000 years, you could be a badass warrior, but why aren't you rich? That's what I want to know. Why aren't you like beyond rich in all measures?
Well, they are, but they're trying to stay under the radar.
Are you sure
they work for money. They're mercenaries. They've even made a point of it, saying that you don't work for the same person twice, because they're always trying to stay under the radar, because if they're found out, somebody's going to want to find out why they're immortal, because they don't know. Yeah, and at the same time, they want to keep helping out humanity, because that's what they've always done. Because only warriors are the ones that are brought back from the dead. There are no people who, the accountant dying doesn't come back. only warriors of the age are the ones that come back.
Yeah, interesting.
And it is interesting too, because it is an interesting premise to have in there that with the immortality, you don't know what it ends.
Yes, that's the best part of the movie.
You jump out the window, you think, yeah, I'll be fine, but you don't know.
You really don't.
You assume you're going to be fine.
That's the best part of it. That's the part of it. And like I said, the background of the characters makes you like them. Like, you talk about Joe and Nikki. Let's just look at two guys who no one's really talked about at all since this entire thing has started. Again, I want to point out, you have a member who was on Suleiman, Persian, and then you had a Catholic. I mean, that whole war that went on the Crusades, so much happened in that world. And these two guys killed each other for a couple hundred years before they turned into being, boyfriend. And although, say what you will either way, that story is really dramatic. I'd love to have seen them on a battlefield in the Crusades going against each other.
Well, in the comics, it's only 6 pages long.
But you can do a lot in 6 pages.
And it beats the 0 seconds they spent on it in this movie.
That is true.
I knew he was coming with that. We got it. Oh, I'm so glad we got to add that in there.
So, guys, would you go rewatch this thing anytime soon?
No, probably not. I have to wait a little bit of time.
I will watch this again right before I watch the sequel, because I do want to see what they do with the sequel. But if that sucks too, I'm out. I'm done.
He's giving up. He's out of the story.
When this came out, it was the #1 movie on Netflix for a couple weeks in a row.
What? I'm just going to say it out there. That's why I'm giving it a medium thumb, a little high.
Let's be totally honest, though. I'd like to know what the #1 movie on Netflix is every week, and I would say that for 50 weeks out of the year, it's probably garbage.
No, Mitchell versus the Machine was #1 for 2 weeks in a row. And I promise you, if you watch that movie, even though you've got kids, the kids movie, The Mitchells versus the Machine, will make you feel all warm and fuzzy about being a dad and loving your kids. I love cartoon movies. I don't ever tell nobody, but that's my secret little thing, is I watch cartoon movies that make me feel all gushy inside.
So you're telling me you're sharing a secret on a podcast that's going to get broadcast out?
Yes.
So are you looking forward to the sequel that's coming out later this year?
Yes.
I'm on the fence about it. If it wasn't for us watching this now, when the sequel came out, I'd been like, oh, cool, another movie I'm not going to watch. But I'll give this a shot. Because, again, the end of this movie did appeal to me. The shots on the wall of all the things they've done throughout history, that was like, okay, now I'm into this. Let me see what you do next.
All it takes is one moment. All it takes is one moment in time. I feel like this is where we pull up the Eminem song. You got to use this in the moment. Okay, so I'm sorry. Let's go on. I apologize, Chris. I just felt like we had to.
Don't pull that up. Do not pull that up.
That is our intro.
We can't afford to pay for that song.
So, guys, thumbs up, thumbs down. What do you rate it?
I'm giving it 3/4 of a thumb.
I'm giving it 1/4 thumb. It's not a terrible movie, but it is. There are many better movies that do what this does. But with the understanding that the other movie, when the sequel comes out, it could pull this up to a half thumb. We will see.
Wow, that's a tough thumb. I mean, when Superman gets a full thumb, I understand why. It's because he wants to fly. I think a 3/4 thumb gives it all the love it needs. I think if you watch the comics, it automatically jumps up to a 3/4. If you read the comics, you'll get a 3/4 thumb. If you find yourself crapping and you need some reading material, grab a book. I'll send you one.
Yeah, but when I review movies, I always feel if I say to somebody, if you go see this other media, it'll make this thing better, it means it's not a good movie. It just isn't. I mean, it's like saying, go out and read these 50 comics and this one movie will be good. It just means it wasn't a well-written movie because they should have explained it into the movie itself.
You guys should check out this new Italian place. I love it, but it's only good because the place next door is terrible. Like, that's what you're saying.
What I'm saying is go check out this Italian place, but before you go, you need to go to where the sausage is made for this place. It's a great factory. And then come back and you'll really appreciate the Italian food you're eating.
Wow, you guys have dissect. My brother told me I'm getting used to this word and this whole situation I'm in. You have deconstructed my answer. I appreciate both of you for challenging me so eloquently in the deconstruction of my go see and read the comics. I appreciate that.
Now, for me, I would still give this movie a half of a thumb. I enjoy Charlize Theron movies just because the fact that in action movies, she does a really good job in the action itself. I mean, she does most of her own stunts. She practices infinitum to really get the part down. And I appreciate that kind of dedication to it. But as a sort of story writer for a plot development, there isn't really much there. If this came out in probably like the mid 90s, it would have been amazing. But so much has happened since then for screenwriting, for what we expect out of movies. It just doesn't really hold up. but I probably will go rewatch it again before the second movie comes out, just to make sure I'm refreshed on it. And the comic's not a bad read.
Chris, if this came out in the 1950s, this would be a mind-blowing movie. So let's just share that too.
Well, my gosh, if Highlander came out in the 1950s, it would have changed the whole story. You'd have a whole generation of people with long hair and British accents. Well,
They're in Britain, though, so it's not really the same. I'm lost. I don't know what's going on anymore.
This is great.
Where can people find you guys?
I am currently rebranding and rebuilding my entire comic store opportunity, which is right now. So check me out on Facebook, Gotham Knight Comics, or check me on Instagram, or check me out on TikTok. You get all kinds of interesting stories.
And you can always find me at the Retrovaniacs podcast or in my own house, 2 places I hang out fairly frequently.
I can appreciate the house part.
And for me, you can always find me over at Off Panel Creations. I'm always over there trying to build some piece of nerdy furniture. And I want to thank you for listening and spending some time with us today. If you have any thoughts about the old guard and think that the old guard's the best guard, just send us a note over at movie-smash.com, and we'll see you in a couple weeks. Thank you again for listening, and I hope you enjoy the show. This has been Movie Smash with Chris Roberts, Jeremy Parmentier, and Fergel Amayo. Produced by me, Chris Roberts. Executive produced by Off Panel Creations, LLC. Movie clips provided by the respective studios. You can rate and review the show at Apple Podcasts and Spotify. You might even find your review read on a future episode. Got a question for us? Visit us at movie-smash.com and send us a note. It too can be read on a future episode. If you haven't already, please subscribe to Movie Smash wherever you listen to your podcasts.